Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to Friday's Circle Online. Today is a part of Refugee Week. Oh, we haven't started, okay. Instead, we went live. Okay, right. Tell me when, yeah. I'm going to wait. Zubair, I'm going to wait for you to click to send a message saying we're live, and I'll start, inshallah. Saeed, just while we're waiting, can you, in terms of your family members who died, were a lot of them extended family or any of your immediate family who passed away?
No, I mean, most of them, they were the immediate family. Like there was the brother of my grandmother, they my aunties. Of course, it was my mom who we were living in a big family house. So it was my mother, my grandmothers, and then the whole family. We are from family that traditionally they are the mashayikh of the town.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I just
So
we're live now, so we're going to begin, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Friday Circle Online. We have a very, inshallah, very beneficial session tonight. This week is Refugee Week, which is an international event celebrated all over the world to celebrate refugees and their contribution to our societies. The theme of Refugee Week this year is Imagine. So the idea is to imagine a world, a better world. But sometimes to do that, we have to imagine what life is like to be a refugee. And that's what we want to do today, is to experience what it is like for a day to be in the shoes of a refugee. Now, the background you'll see is we've got a map of Eritrea, and one of the most repressive nations on the earth today. Now, when you hear the word refugee crisis, very often our minds go to Syria, to Yemen, to Afghanistan, to the Rohingya. And these are the refugee crises which are broadcast widely on social media, on the international media, and the causes which we all feel very strongly about. But it would probably surprise you, it certainly surprised me, to learn that one of the greatest refugee crises in the world does not come from any of those countries, but it's coming from Eritrea. And it's significant because the size of Eritrea is very small. It's a country which has only less than 6 million people, just over 5.5. And 10% of their people are refugees. Minimum 10%. These are the documented refugees. So if you think about that, 500,000 people roughly, but 10%. Now, if we apply that to the UK, for example, 62 million people in this country, imagine 10% of those were refugees around the world. Imagine over 6 million British people being refugees. So in proportion to the country, the question has to arise is, why are people fleeing this country? And the reality is, and sadly, many of us are not aware of the situation in Eritrea. And I'm sure that if we did know about it, we would feel very strongly about it. And we would campaign, we would lobby, we would do all the things we do for Palestine, for Kashmir, for Syria. We would do that for Eritrea. So we deliberately have decided to focus on Eritrea. I mean, I myself, as many of you know, I'm a human rights solicitor. And even me, it was only when I started doing this job, 12, 13 years ago, that I came across Eritrea and I began learning about the situation. And many of my clients ended up coming from Eritrea. And so working on their cases, it became a cause that's very close to my heart. And it's through this that I met our very special guest who's going to join us today to explore these issues about the history of Eritrea, the politics, and what has led to the refugee crisis. He is the Chief Operations Officer of Ithar Relief, a fantastic charity that does incredible work in the Horn of Africa. The brother Saeed Abdelrahman, he himself was a refugee as a child, so he doesn't need to imagine anything. He's walked the walk. He has experienced the hunger. He's experienced the suffering. And despite going on to obtain a degree in chemical engineering, he has decided to give back to the people in those camps. And he has spent the last almost 3 decades working as a volunteer, as an activist, and as a fundraiser for the refugees in Eastern Sudan. So inshallah, I'm going to welcome Saeed to the program. Assalamu alaikum, Saeed.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Fahad, thank you and Jazakallah khair for the beautiful introduction. And today, the world remember those refugees and their difficulties, atrocities, and tragedies, and the journeys they take from their homeland, from their sweet homeland, from their peaceful land, because of war, because of conflict, internal conflict, or enemy invading their countries, and they make a journey that many of them believe it's only a short journey and they will be back home. And then they find themselves in a situation where for 10, 20, 30, 50 years and second, third generation are stuck in refugee camps. And this is the story of the Eritrean refugees.
Well, I mean, so Jazakallah khair, Saeed. I mean, if we just go straight into the first question, really is, what is it about Eritrea that has led over 10% of the people, there 1 in 10 people in Eritrea are fleeing the country? What's going on there? Why is it so bad?
I mean, just to correct you, Brother Fahad, it's not 1 in 10, it's probably 2, 3, 4 in 10. If you can imagine the number of refugees in Sudan alone, since the war started in Eritrea back in the 60s, over 1.5 million or 2 million people passed the border of Sudan. And today in Sudan only, there is over 500,000 refugees still in Sudan, some of them in the refugee camps, some of them they moved into the towns, and there are a lot of refugees still living in the Middle East, making places like Saudi, Kuwait, Egypt their second home. They are in tens of thousands. There are hundreds of thousands of refugees in Europe, Australia, America today. And Eritrea here, historically, as you can see the map on the background that you're using beautifully, Eritrea is situated in a beautiful location in the Red Sea. It's sitting opposite Saudi Arabia. It has access to the Bab al-Mandab, that small gateway between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, and then to the international sea. It has one of the longest coasts along the Red Sea. It is a location that prevented Ethiopia from having access to the Red Sea. So that is the location of Eritrea, and Eritrea was given its name and title back over 100 years ago. And during the Ottoman Empire, Eritrea was one of the places that was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. And then after that, after the First World War, Italy controlled Eritrea completely. And Asmara, the capital city, was seen as a small Rome. In fact, when they built Asmara, they built it as their second capital city in Africa. So Asmara is beautifully built, similar to Rome. I mean, we have the infrastructure in Asmara is amazing. If it rains in Asmara, after 10 minutes, you don't see the sign of rain. It's all gone. The infrastructure of Asmara, the way it was built, it was very, very modern in comparison to the other African country around it. And then in the Second World War, the British Empire seized control of Eritrea. 10 years later, Eritrea was given semi-independence. So Eritrea meant to be independent since 1952. But the Ethiopian at that time have another idea. So the Ethiopian invaded Eritrea and they had control. So Eritrea was under the control of Ethiopia. That is back between 52 up to 61. In 1961, the Eritreans decided to fight for their land and to seek independence. So the first struggle started in 1961. That was by a leader named Hamid Idris Awate. So from 61 up to 67, that was a war of like only few strugglers and few fighters fighting here and there. But what happened is, on the back of that, if a village in Eritrea was found to support those fighters, Ethiopia will come and burn the entire village. And hence, the journey of the refugees started back in the middle 60s, in particular 67. That's when the first big number of refugees start to travel from Eritrea to Sudan. The nearest border was Sudan. Now imagine that was in 1967. That was the year, by the way, our CEO, the founder of ITAR, Sultan Umar, was born, 1967. So the entire history of the refugees is like the age of Abu Salman, Sultan Umar, over 53 years now so far, subhanallah. So the first people to move from Eritrea to Sudan was in 1967. During that time, in Sudan, even the Sudanese, they did not imagine the scale of the refugees will be that much. So they built a small refugee camp way far from any town, about 2-3 hours, in a place where it was not good enough for human. There were, I mean, I'm told by people who were at first in that refugee camps, there were snakes, there were like all kind of animal insects in that area, and it was only tent. So there was no medical care, anything. Just they built it as a place for those people who are strange coming to Sudan. They will be staying for a few months and going back home. So they give them a small tent and stuff and left them alone. A few years later, the war in Eritrea started to escalate quickly. So the Eritrean, they managed to get kind of good momentum. So the whole Eritrea was liberated almost, apart from Asmara and Musawa. Musawa is the main port, and Asmara is the capital city. So the whole Eritrea was under the control of the Eritrean fighters. All right, that was around 75, 76, 77. This time between 76 to 77, for almost a year and a half, the whole Eritrea was liberated by the Eritrean. Guess what happened at that time? Similar to the situation today in Syria, the Russian, Cuba, and there was a big side of the Chinese. They all supported the Ethiopian because the communists, there was interest for the communists to remain, Eritrea to remain under the rule of Ethiopia. So that's when Ethiopia, they gained huge amount of support, huge amount of weapon, huge amount of airplane. And Eritrea never seen such a destruction like that before. So all of a sudden you have now small towns never experienced this kind of wave of airplane coming and bombarding and striking the town, all right? Day after day, subhanallah. And every town was destroyed almost entirely. And we have places like towns called Barantu, Akurdat, places like Mandafara, all these small towns that you see on the map, maybe Naqfa, all of them, they were destroyed by airplane. But for me, the most memorable things that was, I was in Mandafara. Mandafara is 1 hour driving, it's almost an hour and a half driving from the capital city, Asmara. And my family were there, and we had big family, and my family from my mother.
Before you go into that, I just want to try to get this right. So Eritrea was occupied 3 times, first by the Italians, then by the British, and then by the Ethiopians.
Oh, correct, yes.
You had 3 periods of occupation,
correct.
Continuous conflict, and then you have this very long period of war between 1960s and up to independence, which
correct.
So you've got like 30 years of war. So you have a constant struggle. And as you said, when you had the Russians and China coming in, you said they completely decimated the entire area. So that, I mean, even that in itself, I think is news to a lot of us.
Especially the Russian and the Cuban at that time. It was the whole world was divided, as you remember this time. I mean, every country who was in war, you have to side either the American or the Russian always, to gain the weapon and support. And equally the Eritrean as well. The Eritrean fighters, they were relying on support from during that time from the regimes in Iraq, Syria, and many places. I mean, during this time, the whole world was divided into 2 big campaign. So for children and people who are in Eritrea at that time, of myself and my generation, To start with, when we were in Mandafara, just to give you an idea of what it looks like when you are in a war zone area or in a place of unsettled area. So in Mandafara, for instance, because of the airstrike, all schools were run during the evening, all schools. So we will go to school from 6 o'clock in the evening up to 9:30 in the evening, okay? So up to 10 o'clock. So all schools get run in the evening because daytime, if there is strike, there is a problem all the time. So even though there was difficulties, education was a prime. People still go to school to try to make it, even if it is at night. So as kids, at 6, 7 years old, we used to go to school in the very evening. And then the intense of the strike start to increase. So it was one Saturday, the strike was in the city, and my uncle Ibrahim, I remember, his shop and many businesses and in the middle of the city was hit directly, and he died. And a few days later, the strike was due again. My mother, I remember, this is subhanallah, this is kind of like it's happening now. I remember my mother, who passed away only a few months ago. May Allah shower her his mercy. She said to the family, let's go to the village, because she believed that there will be another airstrike this Wednesday, because she believed that there is airstrike one day after another. So one day rest, and then the next day there is airstrike. And when I say airstrike, it's like a real group of airplanes coming and bombarding at low flight. You know what? And then after 5 minutes, you see the smoke in the entire city, right? You see smoke everywhere, and you see people crying, screaming. And then you have the mourners, they will be coming out in the street, calling people, telling them, you know, the family and so died, please help them to bury their loved one. And then another caller will be from another distance saying the family of so died. And you hear all the time people just moaning and screaming, family after another. And then before then, just only during that time, with the mix-up, what you will find as well, some of the cities, what they experience when the Ethiopian, they start to recapture some of the towns, what they do is they will get a lot of the young people who supported the Eritrean fighters, or some of the Eritrean fighters, they will be shot or killed, and they will be displayed on the street. And it's like a lesson for others, saying you dare to help. And sometimes you will see your brother, you will see your loved ones, and you are not even allowed to cry, because if they realize they are your family, you are in trouble. So subhanAllah, those are some of the stories I remember in Mandafara. Even my mother, she said, she remembered one of her family members was displayed on the road. And she said, we all just, were in shock, and we couldn't even cry. We couldn't shed tears. We couldn't say a word. And we'll be holding each other hand, supporting, saying, don't say a word. And this is the kind of experience people gone through. They can see their loved one slaughtered, dying, and they can't do nothing. And then on that particular day to come back, my mom said it's Wednesday. So she took some of the family. Unfortunately, not everyone in the family agreed to leave Mandafara, the town Mandafara. So my mom took us and took some of the family. And then my auntie and a lot of the family members, they stayed. And the way people were protecting themselves during that time was they would build a shelter, underground shelter. So everyone was advised to build an underground shelter. And in our house, similar to other places, my grandma's house, they had a shelter. But at the same time, there was a building work extension. And what it looked like at that time from the top, it looks like a defense center, probably like a military defense center. So if you look at it from outside, it looks like the complex looks more than a building. So the airplane hit directly on that building.
Wow.
And we were in a village. It was the village we were in. It was Adi Itai. For those who watch, they know the names in Eritrea. Adi Itai is our small village, and it's not far from Mandafara. So you can see the airplane from that distance. You can see the airplane flying. And when we saw it, we never expected the airplane will be hitting one of our homes. And subhanAllah, only an hour later, people coming from the town screaming that the house of Sheikh Ali, which is my grandmother's house, Sheikh Muzammil, the family is known by Sheikh Muzammil. We have this traditional Sufi mashayikh in our country, and my family from my mother were some of the mashayikh in the area. So people were shocked, of course. They are well known in the city. They are leading figures in the Muslim community. And 16 people in that family died, and 16 people from the neighbors in one strike. And people coming to the village screaming, they all died, they all died. And my mother and my grandmother, I remember at that moment, my grandmother, may Allah shower his mercy, her name Sadia, from the shock, she never recovered after that for 20 years from the shock. Her hand started shaking. She literally, for the next 20 years, she lived with that kind of shock in her life. Subhanallah, she never really recovered because it was all her loved one killed in one strike. And my mother was strong. My mother was strong. Credit to her, immediately after that, she decided we need to go to Sudan. But the road Sudan from the Eritrean village to Sudan, it wasn't too long. It takes normally, if you walk, between 2 to 3 days. But because of the war, you have to take the very hard way of zigzag route to avoid many of the conflict, many of the war, many of the airstrike. You have to travel very often at night, rest in daytime between the trees, in the wood, or in some shelter. And you have to try to avoid some of the floods and some of the deserts and some of the animals. And it was, subhanAllah, crazy 6 weeks of traveling on foot. Only we had 3 camels and about 22 people. And the camel, I remember, was used by my auntie who was sick, my grandmother who was sick, and another family. And my mother, being very fair normally, she had a guest in the family in the trip, so she gave her the camel. The rest of us, including my sister at that time, who was only 4 years old, myself, I was 8, and my brother, who was 6, and we all were walking most of the time. Sometimes we have like a couple of young people who will carry us when there is a flood or water or river you have to cross. But the journey is 6 weeks, 6 weeks of seeing war everywhere, because the entire country was on airstrike, constant airstrike. The war was at largest scale between Eritrea and Ethiopia. The Eritreans were struggling. They are pulling out of all the position in Eritrea because of the heavy army of the Ethiopians. So all of them, they were pulling out to go back to the border of Sudan. And it was ugly war. And we witnessed a lot of airstrike as we traveled during those 6 weeks. And one of the memorable things that during the travel was we ran out of water completely. And this is something that relates to the work I'm doing now with Ithar, when we talk about how people struggle to find water. And subhanAllah, when we struggled, my mom said to me, come with me. At that time, although I was 7, 8, but I was the closest to my mom. I was almost like her friends, and she used to talk to me a lot. So she took me, and we went to a water. It's like not a lake, probably smaller, just a water from rain that was dirty, greenish. And my mom said to me, don't tell anybody. And she took her scarf and she started filtering the water. So she filtered the water time and time again until it became a little decent to drink. So people didn't have choice. They can see it's not clean water, but this is how. And I remember how green the water was. I couldn't drink it myself, but I was so thirsty. So everyone has to drink. And she said to me, behave normal in front of people. And subhanAllah, this is the kind of difficulties people faced. And talking about my journey, other people, they faced even a harder time during the journey. Some of them, they were captured by the Ethiopians. Some of them, they were captured by the Eritrean who were recruiting as well. So even if sometimes the Eritrean fighters, if they capture you, they can recruit you to fight with them, which is a noble thing to do. But during a war where everything is lost, people just want to be safe for themselves. So it was difficult. People have to escape from the enemy, escape from the other groups within the Eritrean. You have to escape from difficult places. There are floods of rivers from time to time. People died in making their trip to Sudan. Sometimes, if you are unfortunate, you go into a river that's too deep. People, they don't know the geography of the area. They haven't experienced. People die in those places. Sometimes you die even in a long desert walk because you don't know the direction, and you run out of food, you run out. And subhanallah, but hundreds of thousands of people made it to Sudan. And this is where the largest number of refugees during that time was between 1977 up to 82, almost over a million Eritrean refugees passed the border. That was the largest. And that's when the United Nations was at its peak now to support the Eritrea. It was present at that time.
Wow, that's. I mean, that's just really incredible. I've heard these stories. I take these statements from clients all the time, but I think the perspective that you've put on it about what you've gone through and how you went through it. I mean, what really struck me about your story was your mother. May Allah have mercy on her. If I'm correct, you said that there were 3 camels and 22 people in your family, and you had your sick grandmother and your sick aunt who were using 2 of the camels. And then the 3rd camel, she had a guest staying with her, and she gave the camel to the guest,
Yeah.
rather than her family members, rather than her children.
Yeah, yeah.
Allah, you know, that sums up your charity, Ithar, about sacrificing what you really need and giving it to somebody else who needs it.
Of course.
You know, that comes from your mom. Allah have mercy on her.
I mean, subhanallah, this is something you witness during a difficult time. You witness the pure gold, the character of our parents, our mothers, especially our mothers.
Yeah.
In difficult time, you get to know people and the true personality of people normally in difficult time. And during the travel, one of the striking things was for me was, despite the long distance, despite that we are moving from one village to another, despite that we are facing all the difficulties, my mother was there, subhanallah, to protect all the young girls who was in that trip, all the young people. We had like a number of young people on the age of 16, 17, 18, and she wanted them to be safe to reach to Sudan, rather than getting involved in a fight at the moment that nobody knows who's right, who's wrong, because even the Eritrean, they were divided among themselves, the Eritrean fighters, unfortunately, during that time. And you will see people fighting each other from 2 or 3 groups within the Eritrean. So we have the Jabha Shabiya, Jabha Tahrir, and so on. There were like 5 or 6 groups. Everyone claimed to be, they have the upper hand, they are the right one to defend Eritrea. Some of them supported by the regime at that time, Saddam Hussein, some of them from the regime of Syria, some of them regime from the Chinese, like today the current government. So there were even more division within the Eritrean unities, unfortunately, within the Eritrean fighters. So people were just fleeing the country, just they wanted to be in a safe place, because you fight in like 2, 3 corners at the same time. And for my mother, was like the mission was to keep everyone safe and to make sure everyone at least they have some kind of meal. So to manage 22 people over journey, to get them some food, some water, protection. I tell you what, it's incredible. It's incredible work, and many mothers, they've been doing this. A lot of the Eritrean young people who cross the borders, they have, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have their mothers to thank for, because they were incredible during war. And now you see it in Palestine, you see it in many places, probably Kashmir, India, and Pakistan, and you see it. Mothers, they play a key role, because sometimes the fathers, they are either fighting at the front line, or they are in prison, or they are somehow denied to be with their families, and the mother, they have to work to cover both roles of the motherhood and the fatherhood role. SubhanAllah.
That's fun. That. May Allah bless our mothers. I mean, that's incredible. I think everyone sees the good that their moms do, but in times of conflict, in times of scarcity, in times of where a mother would want to protect her kids, the fact that she can sacrifice to protect other children as well. I mean, that's absolutely mind-blowing. So in this 6-week journey, I mean, when you get to the border, was it just an open border, or was there soldiers you had to illegally cross it? How did you get into Sudan?
Of course, when the war starts and there is a huge number of refugees, there will be arrangement by the UN, by the Sudanese authority. There will be like a welcome refugee welcome center, where when you come straight away, the Sudanese soldiers in the border, they will be directing you where to go. You are safe once you reach the Sudan border. You are safe because all the international agencies there. Unfortunately, what you will find is in many of those refugees is the lack of service and the huge number. The pressure is too much on everyone. When you're talking about thousands of people crossing the border every single day, even the refugee camps at that time, even though they were more adequate than today. So there was a proper tent, there was a proper medical center, there was a daily food supply, there was um, medical care like immune system, vaccination, a lot of stuff. Even though a lot of children, they were falling sick because we are moving from one region to another, from one environment to another. I remember myself, I had all kind of skin disease, and I was the most vulnerable person in the family at that time, because I remember even my hand during that time, I used to have like this skin disease. My hand will be stuck together, and if I open my fingers, I would be bleeding, and I would be taking medication after medication. Any food I eat at that time, I remember, like if I had orange or any fish or any tuna, they used to bring a lot of tuna on those tin. Just my whole body will be like sensitive to many type of food because I'm not used to it. In Eritrea, we eat only injera and a couple of type of food. So kids, they were facing difficulties, family were facing difficulties, and then it's a very unsettling for everyone. And people who are able, they will escape the refugee camps. To be honest, you will find any reason. Are you still with me, Fahad? Have I lost you? Assalamu alaikum.
Sorry, I think I got disconnected just there.
Okay, that's fine.
Now you
So,
said,
sorry, I was saying the refugee camps is always difficult, especially for children, because the number of diseases and the problems that children face in the refugee camps is just too much. And I myself experienced that as a 7 years old. So for us, it was just a matter of how we can get out of the refugee camps. My dad at that time, he was ahead of us in Saudi, and he wanted us, to come out of the refugee camps if we can. And many people who are fortunate enough to have families outside the refugee camps, they will support them. So we'll move to any town in Sudan, rent a flat, and just try to live a normal life. The Sudanese people are very generous people. They do understand. You get like your documentation. I can live a semi normal life. But for thousands who have no support, no family members, maybe, or a father who's able to provide them, they will be stuck on the refugee camps. And very unfortunately, today you have some people who have been in those refugee camps for 5 decades, and some, they are third generation born in refugee camp, third generation, fourth generation. It's sad to say that. I mean, when I go back now after 32 years, 35 years, I went back to the refugee camp. I was shocked to see people who are similar to my situation. They were in the refugee camps back in the late 70s. They are still there with a very, very, very basic life.
these are the same refugee camps. These are the same refugee camps that you.
Yeah. They were just relocated to another refugee camp, because our refugee camp at that time, they were all made of beautiful tent, the UN tent.
Yes.
And then people were moved to live in a different refugee camps slowly, and some of them, they settled in those refugee camps in places like Gargur, places like Wad al Hilaw, some of the oldest refugee camp in Sudan. But fourth generation are born there today, and some people, to be honest, it's the sad thing, brother Fahad, and makes me wallahi cry and sad, and it hurt me, wallahi, it hurt me when I think about it. some of our brothers, wallahi, they don't know even there is a better life than what they have. Wallahi, they don't know. Yani, subhanallah, this is the sad thing. You know, it's like when you go to those places and people living in a very, very simple shelter made of straws and made of simple local material, and all they have maybe is like one um, uh, glass of water, not glass, it's made of you know, the tin of the beans and stuff that we use. They use that for water, and they have small water there. It's not even clean to drink. And from time to time, they will get food supply, and they live a very simple life on dry bread and lentils. That's all they have throughout the years. And when you speak to them, wallah al-azim, they think they have yani, the heaven in their hand. They talk to you as if they have everything, alhamdulillah. They say, wallah, alhamdulillah, we have our food, I have my water. And if they have like, you know, Eritrean traditional coffee, if they have a small coffee at home with small sugar, wallahi, that's it. They think they have, wallahi, they have the heaven in their hand. Wallahi, they care nothing. They said, alhamdulillah, we are fine. And you are sitting there, you know what, you are shocked how fine you are. I mean, what do you mean fine? What else do you have? Do you have enough water to even make wudu today? No, it's just this is their life. This is basically all they see. They don't have mobile phones, most of them. They don't know what's outside the world. Even they don't know what's in the town outside the refugee camps. 2 hours later, 2 hours away from their village, from their refugee camps, they don't know even what's there. From time to time, they see cars coming into the refugee camps. They see some food distributed. Kids, you know, kids, they have no idea what is the chocolate. You know, they have no idea what is chocolate. You give them the chocolate, they open it and they stare at it. You know, some kids, you know, you talk to them about Tom and Jerry, you talk to them about cartoon characters or stories or little book characters like Mickey Mouse or anything. They have no idea. It's almost like living in isolated cave in the 6th or 7th centuries, you know, forgotten completely. They have no idea. Subhanallah. Those are witnessed by our guests who were there. They will ask them questions. You know, from Charity Right, they will ask the kids questions sometimes. Do you know what is Tom and Jerry? They will look at you. Do you know what is Mickey Mouse? They will look at you. They have no idea. No, all these luxuries that we live in, forget it. Even the type of food, the chocolate, they have no idea. Those are refugees completely isolated, completely isolated.
I remember you did a challenge a couple of years back.
Yeah.
I think you for 30 days, for 1 month, all you had was lentils.
Lentils.
That's it. Like
yeah, I've tried it for 40 days, and I've tried it again for about 4 months. And it was a reason for me. It was a good reason to start conversation. I mean, I know people would say, so what? I mean, you've eaten only lentils, but you'll go back to your normal meal afterwards. For me, it was a way to highlight, because I am a person that goes out with a lot of friends, a lot of partners, a lot of our co-workers I attend seminars. So if I'm attending seminar and people like, you know, present me with some prawns and some seafood, and if I say no, I just want lentils, people will ask me why, and then I kind of start the conversation, telling them about the stories, and it become interesting stories for a lot of people. Alhamdulillah, we managed to raise funds, raise awareness. And for me personally, of course, it was very difficult, because there was a time when I would be with my friends in some of the Persian restaurant, Iranian restaurant, or Turkish restaurant, and you see people, you know, with all the grill around you, all the beautiful kebab, and all I have to do is just drink my lentils and just be patient, have sabr, and watch people enjoying their meal. And I was telling them, they said to me, why are you making it difficult for you? So I said, look, the same situation I'm in now, I'm sure there is a widow, there is a mother of orphans who cannot afford anything. And all she can do sometimes is smell this beautiful meat being fried, or some kebab, or some food she can see from neighbors, and she cannot afford it. She will just look at it, and she will just look to the sky and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring faraj and to bring some kind of hope to her. And I've seen in the refugee camp sometimes, you know, when we go to do Qurbani, and Qurbani is coming soon. Yeah, we are so proud that we are donated, mashallah, tabarakallah, one Qurbani here, one Qurbani there. But Brother Fahad, what breaks your heart is when you go to those refugee camps and you go with 200, 300 sheep and 100 camel and 100 cows, and you slaughter all this in the morning of Eid, and you give to a lot of people. Maybe 10, 20, 30,000 people will be smiling, happy that they received some of the sadaqah, some of the meat. But double that number, they will be staring at you with nothing. Eid morning, wallah al-azim, that breaks your heart. Eid morning, you will see children from distance because they are not on the list. You can do nothing about it. You only have limited number of sheep. You can only give it to limited number of people. You've got a refugee camp like Shagrab with over 60,000 people. And at 60,000 people, you will need at least, like, 2,000 cows to distribute to everyone. But we can't afford that. So we take with us like 100 cow and maybe 200 sheep, 300 sheep. And when you bring 100 cow, you are coming with 100 cow. For every 10 cow, you need a big lorry.
Yeah.
So 10 lorry for 100 cow, another 10 lorry for maybe 200 sheep. And people can see vehicles and lorries coming into and they will be running, rushing. Maybe they will get something, and they will be queuing all day. And then after all, you have a list of beneficiaries that they are due to receive. The rest, they have to wait for the next portion maybe. And they will be, wallahi, kids, they will be crying. Wallahi, I came out of the refugee camps crying. I did not feel happy going there distributing food. I came out feeling heartbroken, not knowing what to do. Wallahi, I was just, even Abu Salman, when he comes from the refugee camps, Sultan Omar, he always end up coming, being distressed, having difficulties. For a week, he will be knocked off. He won't be able to speak. And the only thing he would say, Saeed, I've seen stories, new families. What are we waiting? Those people, they've been suffering for so many years. What else we can do? And it's the stories, the daily story, unfortunately. But alhamdulillah, we're doing what we can. And Brother Fahad, be very supportive to
Eid is the only time of the year that many of these people, in fact, probably all of them, will eat meat, right? Because you said
yes.
They have lentils. So is the fact that you have the shortage of meat for them on Eid, is that because of the practicalities of transporting all the animals, or is it because of a lack of donors?
No, it's lack of donors. I mean, the Muslim Ummah has a lot of khair and a lot of good things, and they try to reach out to all the needies around the world. So you've got, places like traditional places like Palestine, Syria, the Shishan. You've got the Asia and Bangladesh, Pakistan, and then you have some of the other countries in Africa, which is well known to the media. And what you will find is with the Eritrea, that nobody knows Eritrea, nobody knows the history of the Abyssinia, the history of the Sahaba, who were, they were refugees, subhanallah, they were refugees in Eritrea. They came from Mecca. And then the people of Abyssinia at that time, which is large part of it is Eritrea, they welcomed the Sahaba, and they give them like refuge, and they refused to return them to Mecca, despite Umar ibn al-As at that time coming with gifts, with gold, with a lot of good things for the king of Abyssinia at that time, to bribe him, to give him back Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Usman ibn Affan, and the rest of the Sahaba who made the hijrah. He said to him, those people are fleeing our country. They are refusing to believe in our God, in our idols, and they are coming with strange and new religion. And they try to bribe the king of Abyssinia so they can get those people back to Mecca. And subhanallah, at that time, and Nagashi, he said, no, I'm not giving you back those people without listening to their stories. And subhanallah, when he listened to the stories, he was in tears, because the stories identical to the stories he learned about Jesus alayhi salam. So when they start reciting Surah Maryam and telling him the stories and what they believe and what is the principle of Islam, subhanallah, Nagashi, he believed in Islam. He kept it in his heart. He refused to return them. And then the people of Abyssinia, from then, they start to embrace Islam. And this is how Islam spread in Eritrea. From then, Eritrea has accepted Islam, and large number who were Christian at that time, they become Muslim, and Islam is spread. Until today, Eritrea, Muslims and Christian, they live side by side with no problem. We didn't have any issue throughout the history in Eritrea. In fact, there is a mutual respect and a very good citizenship in Eritrea. It just currently, and Brother Fahad, maybe you realize that still people are fleeing Eritrea, unfortunately, today.
I wanted to, I think that was my initial question.
Yeah.
You've given a really nice historical context about why so many people originally fled because of the war and conflict. But since independence in 91, and since, there's been one government in power for the past 20, 25 years, why are people still fleeing Eritrea? Why is it still one of the greatest contributors to the refugee crisis around the world? I mean, what's happening now?
I mean, without going into my opinion about the political climate in Eritrea, and I want to avoid that purely because I represent Ithar as well, and I need to be fair to people who are donating and making contribution to help humanitarian in the area. So my opinion will not matter in this content. What I will say is I'll give you facts that's outside there for anyone to see. Eritrea, after its independence, never settled. There was always issue with our neighbors. Okay, people they can research the reasons, but we had war with another war with Ethiopia, which was very large, starting in the mid 90s. We had a war with Yemen due to conflict around some of the islands. We have issue with Djibouti. We have issue with Sudan. So as a result, there was a military service, non-ending military service imposed on the young people in Eritrea from the age of 18. And I think it's the age of 16, I'm not too sure, up to the age of 60. So anyone who is between those age, male or female, they are obligated, they must serve. And unfortunately, although so people supposed to serve only for 2 years, but the vast majority, they will be serving indefinitely in places like, building road, breaking mountain, and collecting rocks, and so on. It was beyond the war. So people couldn't cope with that. I mean, if you are a young man who's looking after his mother and he's the only person looking after his mother, how can they cope with no salary, with no adequate support? And some of them as well, they were sent to war, and we lost a lot of loved one in a meaningless war against Ethiopia, against the other neighboring countries. And on the top of that, for various reasons, there was lots of arrest and imprisonment for various type of people, religious leaders from the Muslim and Christian, other people who have different opinion to the political climate or political opinion that's the mainstream in Eritrea. And as a result, all these factors, and the fact that Eritrea the economy is very low at the moment, people did not have enough money to earn. You combine all that, and it's a perfect recipe for people just to flee their country, unfortunately. So you have like hundreds of people fleeing the country every single month. On average, at the moment, between 20 and 30 people arrive in the border of Sudan on daily basis. Daily basis. Between 20 to 30 people arrive in Sudan.
And I'm conscious that you're restricting what you can say. And so if you don't say it, I think I'll say it because I've got no restrictions on me. But if someone wants to leave the country, why can't they just book a ticket and get a visa for
Europe? No. I mean, this is all not allowed. As I said, the Eritrean government have a different view on that. They want people to serve a military to help with the situation. This is how they view it. For that reason, they are restricting. Otherwise, a lot of people will be just leaving the country. So they have their own opinion on that. But
so you're not allowed to leave. Is it like illegal?
No, you're not. There is no normal route out. No, there is no normal route out. So people cannot just go to apply for visa to visit or to go to neighboring countries for. No, they can. There is a lot of restriction. But having said that, the point is, for those various reasons, economic, the political instability, the endless military action, and many other reasons. People are unable to cope with that, so they start leaving. But the tragedy not here only, Brother Fahad. The tragedy is those people when they leave Eritrea, a lot of them, they leave Eritrea in the hope to reach to a peaceful land like England or Europe. So they take a huge risk in making the journey from Eritrea to Sudan. Wallahi, subhanAllah, I become emotional even when to just thinking about people who passed away on this. It's crazy. It's like I met people here who lost their loved one in the way. So imagine you the journey for those people who don't know. You leave Eritrea, probably you will be walking for days from Eritrea, and then you end up in Sudan. And some of them you end up in refugee camps like Shagrab. And then some of them they don't settle on those refugee camps, so they decide to flee to a place like Libya. And then you have to travel days with those traffickers. Um, you pay a lot of money, and God knows how you get the money. And some of them, they will be kidnapped, and their family will be asked to pay ransom to free them. Some of them, if they are unable to pay to free themselves, their body will be sold, body part, in Sinai, in Egypt, or in Libya. And in Libya, the story get worse, because some of the Eritrean, they will make it to the seaside, and then they try their luck through the ocean of the Mediterranean. Or some of them, they will be enslaved in Libya. And we have hundreds of Eritrean now working in farms in Libya. They are treated like slaves. In this time, we have hundreds of Eritrean imprisoned in Libya, with some tribes, with some groups there, bad groups, bad people using them as a slave, and they cannot even leave their farms or their houses. And that's it. They are told that we paid your master, and you belong to us today. Can you imagine in today's day? I mean, you wake up in the morning and somebody's telling you, I'm your master. You're going to work for me for the rest of your life. Subhanallah. Wallahi, this is happening. And a lot of Eritrean, Sudanese, and some African, they suffer this problem. That's in Libya. And then some, they make it out of Libya through the Mediterranean. And the largest number, probably came across this, the largest number of victims in the Mediterranean before the Syrian war, it was the Eritrean. Hundreds of them every single month. So the atrocities continue, just all these tragedies, one after another. And then they reach to their destination in Italy or Greece. And then again, some of them, they are not settled. They just want to be in a better place. They end up, you taking those lorries and another risking their life to come to UK. Wallahi, some of them, by the time they arrive in UK, the level of traumas they've seen, the level of atrocity, the level of psychological problem they've been through. The amount of self-harm and suicide in UK among the Eritrean young people is very, very high. Very high. Every single month we hear about 3 or 4 people killing themselves. Young people, 18, 19, 21, 25 years old, because they end up coming to UK and they wake up here, they think it's heaven, everything will be easy. And then you've got the difficulties of language and the challenges of making money, paying the debts. Your mother probably sold her house to finance you to make it to Europe. And they go through this crazy internal dilemma, thinking about how am I going to make quick money, or I need to secure a job quickly. And if their documentation delayed and they are unable to earn money, they just mentally, they will break down. And some of them, they just decide, what, let me end my life, because it's just been miserable all along. And we have like a lot of young people who took their life. Unfortunately, they didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's just I mean, no words can describe how tragic that is, that after undergoing all those ordeals, all those trials, the trek across the desert, the slavery in Libya, the journey across the Mediterranean, then traveling across Europe, and then to find yourself. And I'll add to those problems is the issue about the asylum process, how long it takes, the delays, the hostile environment that they have to operate in. They can't work, they can't get benefits, they can't get a job, they can't study, open bank accounts. So all of these issues, you're still sort of trapped. And after all of that, then to take your life, it's horrific. And when you think about when people see refugees, and it's such a loaded word, they just hear refugee, and you hear asylum seeker, and you think of, oh, they're coming here for our money, our job, they're scrounging, they're lying, they're bogus claims. And people who come at this issue with that mentality, it's like, how much do you unpack? We've just spent an hour talking about refugees, and I'm sure you could spend like a week talking to me about this. But in 1 hour, the amount of information you've shared with us, I'm just wondering if people could hear that and understand that when they see somebody on the street and they see somebody who's a refugee, and they could have just a small insight into what they've gone through to actually get to the UK, they might show a little more compassion, a little more sympathy. And that level of kindness is just missing in our conversation. It's all about the economy, it's all about statistics, it's all about really, really sort of dry subjects. But when you look at the human being at the center of all that's missing completely.
Mm. I mean, it's really sad, as you said. People, they don't know the inside story of every individuals who try to secure a safe life and a safe passage for themselves. I mean, when you talk to some young people, the other day I traveled to Coventry to meet one young person, one young Eritrean. I was told that he was going through mental breakdown. He was only 17, and he was placed in manor house. When I spoke to him, you know what? From the age of 12, 13, this boy, he was a refugee in the refugee camps in Ethiopia, and then he decided that he had seen enough because his father was tortured, his brother was tortured, and then he looked at his mom, and he decided maybe he can try a new life. His mom supported him, and then he started making this crazy journey, and he ended up in England. Unfortunately, by the time he arrived here, Allah knows, you couldn't tell whether during the difficult route he was um, kidnapped. There's a sign of torture in his body. Um, Whether he was abused, physically, sexually, you don't know what went through the life of this young person who was he's only 17, but he already had a complete mental breakdown. The boy now, he talked to himself a lot, and during night time he get this nightmare, and even their manager and the manager in the house, the children house, he was trying to find solution. She felt so sorry, and she said to me, this is not the first time we've seen this with young people, and some of them, they fall easily on alcohol, drug, because they think this is the way out. And for some, it's been difficult journey, but they think by taking some alcohol and taking some drugs, maybe this will ease their pain, and they end up in even a worse situation. And I know now, I mean, as somebody who trying to help young people and trying to get into the circle of young Eritrean refugees, I am shocked at the level of young people going through maybe abusing like alcohol and drugs, and getting into this kind of criminal world, and they think that will ease their pain. The problem is they are misled to think that this will ease their pain, and then before they know it, they become addicts, and they become like a victim of those bad habits. And then the next thing is, it takes you to a next level, unfortunately, with no support. And we live in a society today, if you make those kind of mistakes and they are in your record, it's very, very difficult to correct them, Brother Fahad. You know that you can't get a job, and the perception within the community, within the family, unfortunately, even within the Muslim community, which hurts even more, that when we talk about our community and we look at somebody who made a mistake, they are young, We don't welcome them with open arm. We look into their past and into their mistakes, and we judge them, and then they end up isolating themselves because they're afraid to come into the community. They're afraid to speak to their aunties, to their community leaders, or to seek support from their friends. They isolate themselves even further, and the problem start to grow until they find life and death is equal. And this is the worst scenario always people reach, that when they see both things are the same thing. You know what, if I live in a dignified life, okay, otherwise let me just take my life. And so people, they don't get even fed up of me. Subhanallah, this is the kind of result that we see, and we hope that together we can change those facts.
Well, look, the situation in Eritrea is not going to get any better. I mean, I just wanted to share with some of the sort of statistics I've looked up, that it's these, you talked about slavery in Libya. After North Korea, Eritrea is the second highest prevalence of slavery in the world. This is from 2018. The UN reported that's the most censored country. It's the least free press in the world after North Korea and Turkmenistan. If to move within this country, you have to actually have a yellow ticket to move from city to city. They operate a system of spying within the country, so they recruit civilians to spy on each other. And if one civilian comes back with nothing to report, he risks being jailed himself for not having any information. So you can see the kind of insular, hostile environment that's being created, where any sort of criticism of the government can result in you being detained, disappeared for years on end, tortured, executed. And I say that because it means that until the political situation changes, we will still continue, as you said, to have hundreds of refugees leaving every day, every week, trying to escape. And that means that the camps that you talked about, which are already overflowing in Sudan, in Djibouti, around the world, that we have to come to a solution. Now, you guys in Ithar are doing some incredible work, and short of, obviously, there's the humanitarian aspect where we can, donate, and inshallah, I hope many of the people who are listening and are watching this will visit your website and will want to donate to solve the crisis in any meaningful way. But is there anything we can do on a wider level to help raise awareness about what's happening in the camps, what's happening in Eritrea, and what can we do to help?
I mean, to start with, Brother Fahad, myself and many people, of course, and thousands of Eritreans, we wish that we come to a complete solution where people can go back to their countries, live a dignified life. There will be kind of sensible negotiation within the Eritrean government in itself. In Eritrea, things change where people are allowed to just live a normal life, and that's the ultimate hope for. Just bear with me, Fahad. Take note. So that's the ultimate way. Failing to do that, and it just how do we stop those people just making this difficult journey? One way is to make sure in the first refugee camps that they arrive and they settle, there is enough hope, enough infrastructure for those people to settle quickly and to start a new life. So if they arrived in Sudan, one of the issues we have with young people in Sudan, for instance, is there is no proper education system for refugees there. There is no vocational training. There is no way for them to work and earn money. The medical provision is very weak, very poor, and you've got many people who have no shelter or home. People, they want to live normal life, get married, earn money. They can't do that. The clean water is a struggle every single day. So number one is to have a dignified life within your country. Failing to do that, if people go to refugee camps, the nearest refugee camp, whether it's Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Yemen, at least they can get something to start with. And if there is this infrastructure available, then people will not take this risky route all the way to Libya and through the Mediterranean to make it to Europe. I think that will be a sensible things to do. Having said that, still the difficulties is like in Libya, for instance, they are completely abandoned. There is not a single humanitarian organization that work on those places to help the Eritrean. So in Libya, they are completely abandoned. There is a couple of informal groups who are trying to be the link, the bridge, but they are very, very small groups and they are informal. So I'm hoping now with the situation in Libya changing, maybe there will be access for organizations like Ithar and others to go and help and support there. That will be a wonderful thing. And then finally, Brother Fahad, when people arrive, okay, for whatever reason they decide to come to Europe, they arrived in Europe, they need to get the right support. You cannot just assume these people who all of a sudden they will just live a normal life and start their life. You know, some of them, they when they apply for asylum seeker, within few weeks, if they are given their permit and they're indefinite, they will be treated like a normal UK citizen. You know, go out, find work, and then all the bills, all the financial responsibilities, and you know they are on the street. As somebody who's 17, who's been through this
Yeah.
difficult journey, you know, mentally they are tortured. There is no support for them. All of a sudden you are in the street and you are supposed to earn your money, pay your rent, and do all the little things that we came through the system and we are okay with it. They are not okay. Mentally, they are not prepared for it. They should be kind of support, and unfortunately, a lot of them, they are left alone and they suffer. And as a result, I know people today, subhanallah, wallahi, every single day they cannot go to bed because they are thinking about their rent, about their not able to secure a job and their dream being shattered. They need to be more support for those people, you know, mentally.
So how can we as a community help sort of integrate those refugees better? How can we welcome them to our circles? And how do you identify one and bring them in to give them that emotional support that they need? Because very often I think the problem is you don't know them. You don't know who's an issue. You might see them, and maybe that's again our problem. We don't socialize enough. We don't make the effort to get to know people in the masjid, in the mosques, and that's something that we need to do more of, perhaps. Saeed, I don't think your mic is working.
Yes, sorry. I think it's important to make sure that our services in such community centers, whether it's mosques, community centers, community groups, we need to make sure there is enough signage and enough information to say to people, if you are new in this country, if you need help, if you need a friendship, do approach our management, or there should be a system every single place. In today's world, to be honest, because of all the issues that the Muslim community face, masjids, they are limiting their services. You know, we are open for a dhuhr from this time to this time, and then we are closed, asr this time to this time, and we are closed. And then for Isha, you know, 20 minutes after Salat al-Isha, everyone need to leave. And the masjids, their service has been limited to Salah only. Let's hope, inshallah, after we come back from this lockdown, that the masjid, they will play a greater role, because a lot of people, they come to masjid. So they can be given like an opportunity to meet other people, to speak. The services should be obvious, displayed, and some mosques, they can do even greater job. That's one. And secondly, community centers. Increasingly, community centers now, they become like more or less, they look into their own small interest, tribes, groups, rather than thinking about benefiting the wider community.
Yeah.
And many of the community-based services at the moment is very selective, unfortunately, even within the Eritrean community. I can say that very selective. You know, they serve particular type of group, particular type of tribe, particular type of interest, which is not good. I mean, we are brothers and sisters in humanity, and our services should be extended. I mean, when, as I said, when Nagashi in the Abyssinia, when he welcomed the Sahaba, they didn't know them. They have different colors, different language, different background, everything. But those people, they needed a shelter, they needed help, they needed a safe refuge for themselves, and they were welcomed. And this is what's happening. And in the European community in general, you can see that even institutionally, there is to great extent a very welcoming atmosphere to support refugees. Okay, let's be fair. We all benefit, myself and a lot of people benefited from the system that exists here, from the services that's allowed to use. And if you are a proactive person, you can utilize a lot of those. But there are some vulnerable people who need our support more. And we, as new communities, we need to raise our level of service. We need to raise our interest to support those in need from whatever background it is. And talking today about the Black communities and Black Lives Matters and on all that. And subhanallah, in Islam in particular, this has been the case from day one. You know, from day one, from the day Bilal said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. You know what? Yani, subhanallah, when you hear the story of Bilal and how the Prophet ﷺ honored Bilal and how he stood by him when Bilal had all these challenges with the head and the reach of Mecca, how Bilal stood by, the Prophet ﷺ stood by Bilal and the other Sahaba who were from various backgrounds, you know, black, brown, Asian, and from the Roman Empire, from all of them, subhanAllah, all they were treated equal. And how the Prophet ﷺ, even later on when there was an issue with Bilal and Abu Dhar al-Ghafari, the story, if people just realize even our Prophet, how he was dealing with those issues, for him it wasn't like an issue just to settle it quickly. It was no, to bring it to the community and saying, we are all equal, we all belong to Adam, we came from male and female cells. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us so we know each other. There's no one better than another person, unless by taqwa, by the fearness of Allah, by their good deeds. That's how you get close to Allah, by your good deeds, nothing else. And in today's world, as Muslims, as community, we need to spread those words. We need to make sure that we are out there visibly helping, supporting. And I was so glad to see many Islamic centers reach out to the community, to the wider community, you know what, to the elderly people, black, white, and everyone, supporting them, taking food packs to their houses and supporting them. And imagine if we can do the similar things to the refugees, you know, similar to what the mosque did today. You know how the mosque and the Islamic centers today, they supported. You still there, Fahad? I think we lost you. Is it me or Fahad? Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, Brother Fahad, are you back?
Baba, check your internet. Hold on.
Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum. I'm here.
Alaikum.
Sorry, is it your network? Hello, Fahad?
Alaikum, Saeed, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam, I can hear you. I'm here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, is it your
I'm having some
your
technical
network?
problems. Yeah, I think it's a network. It just went.
Hello, Fahad?
Assalamualaikum, Saeed. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum assalam, I can hear you. I'm here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, is it your
I'm having some
your
technical
network?
problems. Yeah, I think it's a network. It just went.
Hello, Fahad?
Assalamualaikum, Saeed. Can you hear me?
I can.
It's no.
Big echo.
Can you hear me now?
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
I think the echo was on Facebook. I have Facebook open as well to try to get onto it that way.
I see. Are we back? Still, your Zoom is not active.
Hello, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear viewers and Ustaz Sheikh Saeed, unfortunately, Brother Fahad has disconnected due to technical difficulties, so inshallah we will not be able to proceed. But if Brother Saeed, if you want to leave us with some thoughts on how we can help the Muslims in Africa and so on, and Abyssinia, and some final thoughts, obviously, to inspire us as Muslims, in serving the community and the Muslims worldwide, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, will do. Okay, dear viewers, thank you for watching and despite the difficulties in the technology. We as Muslim Ummah, to start with, subhanallah, our life is not measured by how long we live. People could live 70, 80, 100 years, but their life and their years and months and days might mean nothing. But we are measured by what we achieve and how much change we make in our life and how much impact we make in our community and in the world. And trust me, subhanallah, and if you listen to the story of Nagashi, who welcomed the Sahaba, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, nobody heard of Nagashi that much, to be honest. I mean, nobody even knows a lot of stories, personal stories about Nagashi, but it was only that window, that opportunity given to him to support the Sahaba, that made history for himself, that he made history in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. He's mentioned to the Judgment Day, because he made that decision to be proactive and to support and to protect those who were in need at that time. He could have done like many other tribe leaders or kings who did refuse the message from the Prophet ﷺ, or who decided to give their back and to ignore the plea and the request from the Sahaba to support them. But Nagashi decided to support them. And today we have opportunity and to help those in need in Africa. And we know we live in alhamdulillah, in a luxury life. For most of us, having breakfast is not a big deal. Your children will wake up and come to your bed and ask you to prepare breakfast for them. And what you're going to say to them, just go to the fridge and pick up anything. It's a very simple. You don't even think about it. You have your clean water in your hand all the time, and you don't think about it. You children are unwell for whatever reason, and you go to the fridge, open it, and you'll get a piece of Panadol or paracetamol or ibuprofen, and you don't think about it. In the refugee camps, thousands of children, they become paralyzed, mentally paralyzed, physically paralyzed. They become disabled because of lack of a single Panadol or aspirin, or even lack of knowledge how to reduce the temperature on their body. A lot of people, they drink dirty water throughout their life, that you see the impact on their teeth, on their chest, on their lungs, on their body. You see the lack of nutrition on single child that you meet in the refugee camps. They struggle every single day. Their struggle started from the moment they open their eyes in the morning. With the Fajr prayer, they think, do I have water to make wudu? You wake up in the morning, subhanAllah, they don't have toilet. The toilet facility does not exist in refugee camps. Many refugee camps, not only the Eritrean, even other. They have to go to respond to the nature outside the camp. So for them, life is difficult with every single minute. They didn't select to be there. They didn't choose to be in the refugee camps. I was in a refugee camp myself. Alhamdulillah, I was fortunate to leave the refugee camps after a few weeks. My friends and my brother and my sisters who came with me in those refugee camps, they are still there after 50 years. SubhanAllah, so they did not select there, but we have the choice to how to spend our money. They don't have the choice to sleep on that refugee camp, to eat whatever they find, to drink whatever they get from the water. They have no choice. But we have choice how to spend our salaries, how to support. It's very simple. Okay, you can remember them with dua. You can remember them by reaching out to community charities like Ithar Relief. You can remember them by setting a small project, taking the project, you and your friends, even purchasing like a water supply for a week, for a month. There are various projects you can support us with, but the least you can do is make dua. Thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not test us like He did test them. Wallahi, I could have been in that situation for the rest of my life. I'm grateful, I'm thankful, alhamdulillah. Every single day I say alhamdulillah that I'm in a better position when other people, they are still struggling every single day. And you as well, don't take it for granted that you are living in a beautiful house and you've got beautiful car. Alhamdulillah, this is ni'mah and blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's an equal test for you. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are thankful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase your wealth. This is the promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we are being ignorant and arrogant about the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might test us in a different way, at a different level. And you don't want that, subhanAllah. Give while you have the power to give. Give while you have the money in your hand, because tomorrow you might not have it. Your health might suffer. You will not be able to do physically the things that you're supposed to do. And then, subhanAllah, those are the kind of tests that we don't want to go through. Give while you can, help while you can. Inshallah ta'ala, help out of good intention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran said, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And He said, Allah, they give, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ, they feed, they give food, عَلَى حُبِّهِ, for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Miskeen, those who are in need, وَيَتِيمًا, orphans, وَأَسِيرًا, those who are in prison. So Allah even mentioned 3 types of people that, subhanAllah, a poor person, an orphan person, and Brother Fahad and the group, they work with people who are wrongly being imprisoned or being persecuted for wrong purposes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in the Quran, that you need to support those type of people. So we have the opportunity, Allah. It's all in our hands, subhanAllah. We have the upper hand. We are in a much better position to do what we can do. And life is a struggle, but the struggle for them is every single minute. For us, it might be tested on a weekly basis, monthly basis, who knows. Alhamdulillah, we live much better life. So inshallah, we'll remember them all together.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Saeed. It's really been enlightening, with the apologies for my technical difficulties earlier. But I know you're really, really busy, guys. So I'm really grateful that you've given us time this evening to educate us about the refugee crisis. We are in a unique position because we are able to work through charities like yours to help the refugees on the ground in the camps. But at the same time, we're in a very unique position because we're on the ground here with those same refugees. When they arrive on our shores, as you said, they're even more traumatized and they've gone through even more tests to get here. But we somehow forget to see them as refugees at that point. And I think that is a test for us, that those same refugees we want to help, Allah has put them on our doorstep. And they're still in need of our help, of our financial support, of our emotional support, our practical support. So we are able to help them in that way while carrying on to help you support those people in the camps in Africa as well and in the Middle East. So I hope that this has been enlightening for our viewers, and we hope that people will take the initiative to get involved with these type of projects to learn more about the situation in Eritrea, and inshallah to help make that small change, because of course none of us will be able to change the entire population of Eritrea, change the history of that country. But if you help that one refugee in your community or that one orphan in the refugee camp, you'll have changed their lives. Like, look at Brother Saeed, as he said, he could have been like the rest of them, but he was taken out of those camps and he is managing to give back now. His life was changed. So don't ever think that the good you do for one person won't change the world. It'll change the world for that one individual. And that's all that's a huge thing to do for any other person. So inshallah, I hope next week you'll all join us again for what will be another interesting topic. But for now, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for tuning in. Inshallah, next week.
Thank you.